So this begins with a preface. And the first line begins, "Under my desk, I keep a large carton of cassette tapes. Even though they have all been transcribed, I still like to listen to them from time to time." And this is demarcated as one short paragraph, right? You should have a copy there that I've provided. So let's look at what she's saying here. Under my desk, I keep a large carton of cassette tapes. What does it mean, cassette tapes? She's talking about what is a cassette? It's an audio cassette, right? Audio cassette that we used to slip into, a Walkman, a Sony Walkman, if you remember, back in the day, back in the 80s. So now she says a carton. What is a carton? What is the size of a carton? Is it this big? Is that a carton? Well, no, it's kind of a dish, isn't it? A carton would be, how big would a carton be? Is this a carton? Holding these chocolate croissants? No, not really. A carton is it's kind of you would say a foot by a foot, right? Maybe 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, width, depth, height. So a carton it's fairly large, and cassette tape's relatively small. So if she has a large carton of cassette tapes, if it's not a box, but a carton, how many cassette tapes would fit in there, do you think? 50? Maybe more than 50, right? 100? Maybe 100. 100, 150, right? Let's say 100. Let's just say, for argument's sake, 100 cassette tapes. I think actually closer to 200, in fact. But so under my desk. Now, what do we keep under our desk? Do we keep unimportant things under our desk? No. The first three words have a personal pronoun, my. So the author isn't speaking objectively. The Hmong people are from a northern Vietnamese hill tribe. No. She begins with her vantage point, the author's vantage point, which draws us in within the first three words, under my desk. Most of the readers, if they can afford a book that's even, $15, $20, $12, we have a desk. Somewhere we've had a desk. While we were a student in grade school, we had a desk. She has a desk at home. Under my desk, it's her desk. Under my desk, I keep. Not I store. When you store something, you're putting something sort of away. I store things in a closet. But when we keep things in a closet, we usually think we're soon going to need it, right? I keep that in the closet in case I need it. We don't say I store it in the closet unless we're not going to use it. So she says, under my desk, I keep a large carton of cassette tapes. Okay. Second sentence. Even though they have all been transcribed, I still like to listen to them from time to time. So a key word here is transcribed. To transcribe a cassette, now cassettes usually come in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 90 minutes, right? I don't know if you're aware of that, but typically those are the three main length in terms of time, the amount of magnetic spool material there that's magnetically capturing the sound that was recorded onto this magnetic tape. And so let's just take the average. Let's say most of the cassettes are 60 minutes, all right? So if most of them are 60 minutes, and she says, even though they have all been transcribed, does anyone know how much time it takes to transcribe 1 hour of material? Assuming that what's on the cassette is completely from one end to the other, 30 minutes, and then you flip it over, and the next slide is another 30 minutes. Any idea how long it takes to transcribe 1 hour of recorded? When you play, you rewind, you type it in, you play again, you rewind, you type it in, you check. That process typically takes, a very fast person could probably do 1 hour-long cassette in 4 hours. And to get it perfect with all of the ums and uhs and hesitations and sounds in the background to make little notes to annotate the cassette, 8 hours. So a 1 hour cassette takes 8 hours to transcribe properly. If there's 100 cassettes and it takes 8 hours, well, 8 times 100 is what? Right? Is it 800 hours or 8? Wow, that's a lot of time, isn't it? So she says, even though they've all been transcribed, right? I still like to listen to them from time to time. That's why she keeps it there, because she listens to it from time to time. And it's like, not love, but like. And she listens. So the next verb is, even though they've all been transcribed, I still like to listen to them from time to time. So time is a variable, listening is a variable, transcribing a variable related with time, because it takes so much time to transcribe a cassette. And that's just the beginning. All right. So it's personal. These are meaningful. She's listening to something. What is she listening to, right? We're left with the feeling, why does she keep them under her desk? A large carton. What's the content? And why is she listening to them? Wonderful way to begin. We have no idea we're talking about Hmong people, a child who has epileptic seizures, whose medical condition is being interpreted variously across cultures. We have no idea about this. All we know is Anne Fadiman's take. All right. The next line, her third sentence, begins the next paragraph. Some of them are quiet and easily understood. So when she says, I still like to listen to them from time to time, by them she means the cassettes. Here again, she says some of them are quiet and easily understood. But is she also talking about the Hmong? Are the Hmong also them? Let's see. Some of them are quiet and easily understood. They are filled with the voices of American doctors, interrupted only occasionally by the clink of a coffee cup or the beep of a pager. They, the cassettes, are filled with the voices of American doctors, interrupted only occasionally by the clink of a coffee cup and the beep of a pager. So the clink of a coffee cup, we all know what that's like, clink, and the beep of a pager. So pagers, before there were, research was done in the 90s. So before we had cell phones, a pager was the way a doctor was signaled. Some still have pagers actually, and it makes a sound like or it vibrates or both. And then the doctor quickly has to look at the number, the telephone number, who's contacting them on the pager, and then they can call using their cell phone. Back then, you had sometimes a flip phone, right? That's about it. So she talks about voices, right? Some of them are quiet and easily understood. They are filled with the voices of American doctors, interrupted only occasionally by the clink of a coffee cup or the beep of a pager. The rest of the tapes, dash, more than half of them, dash, are very noisy. They are filled with the voices of the Lees, L-E-E-S, comma, a family of Hmong refugees from Laos who came to the United States in 1980. I'm sorry, I always make this mistake. Not Vietnam, Laos. Laos. Against a background of babies crying, children playing, doors slamming, dishes clattering, a television yammering, and an air conditioner wheezing, I can hear the mother's voice, by turns breathy, nasal, gargly, or hum-like, as it slides up and down the Hmong language's 8 tones. The father's voice, semicolon, the father's voice, comma, louder, and slower, and more vehement, semicolon, and my interpreter's voice, mediating in Hmong and English, low and deferential in each language. The hubbub summons a whoosh of sense memories, the coolness of the red metal folding chair reserved for guests that was always set up as soon as I arrived in the apartment, and I'll just stop there. Let's go back. When she says the rest of the tapes, more than half of them are very noisy and comes to a full stop. When we get to the word noisy, is it pejorative? Noisy in contrast with the voices of American doctor. What is she talking about? She says they are filled with the voices of the Lees, a family of Hmong refugees. She doesn't say a Hmong refugee family or a refugee family of Hmong. She starts with the word family. Do you think that's important, to say family first rather than Hmong first rather than refugee first? They are first and foremost a family whose daughter is going to be the subject of an object of their concern in a very serious way. When she begins with family, she does it on purpose. Everything here is purposeful. There's no accident. This is a manicured, poetically structured, beautiful, carefully designed opening. And yes, you can pay this much attention to an opening of even an essay. Every word of the first paragraph of your paper, to let your reader know how much you're involved in the subject and that you care. You can bring them in using sense memories, using senses, just like this. There's nothing wrong with it. And if you have ever watched a TED Talk that's a good one, filled with a story, the personal becomes the political, the personal becomes the social, the personal becomes the transformative. I didn't know anything about this topic until one day something terrible happened. I learned something later, and by the end of it, I realized that this is what we need to do in the world, and I need to be part of it, right? Every TED Talk is a personal journey that is transformative. That's why we're listening to the person, because their story is our story. We've all gone through a transformation. We've all gone through some sort of arc of not understanding to transformation, and we're somehow on the other side of that at some point, to some degree, with respect to some aspect of our lives. So a TED Talk is a well-structured narrative that is not third person. Hmong refugees have 8 tones in their language. She doesn't say that. She could have said that. She could have easily have said, among the 8 tones, 4 of them were heard on these, like, most often. No, she doesn't do the clinical, third person, impersonal, technically distant, sort of proper, let's say, accounting of cultural attributes. No. That's somebody else's job. Her job is to make us understand what went on. What went on in terms of the wellness journey, the illness journey of this family as they cared for their daughter. Let's go. She writes, they are filled with the voices of the Lees, a family of Hmong refugees from Laos who came to the United States in 1980 against a background, came to the United States in 1980. I'll say it again. They are filled with the voices of the Lees. So she gives their name first, yes. A family of Hmong refugees from Laos who came to the United States in 1980. Again, her verbs are important. They came to the United States. She doesn't use the word arrive. She doesn't use the word were accepted, United States. She doesn't use use an adjective like finally arrived. No. Doesn't discuss both people. Just came. Who came? It's again purposeful. Just watch how she does this. The next sentence, we're only 7 lines in, but check out how she paints the picture. She writes, against a background of. Okay, those are the words she begins. Against a background of babies crying, comma, children playing, comma, doors slamming, comma, dishes clattering, comma, a television yammering, comma, and an air conditioner wheezing. We all know what that sounds like, an air conditioner wheezing. I can hear the mother's voice by turns. 4 adjectives: breathy, nasal, gargly, or hum-like, not and, interestingly, or hum-like, as it meaning her voice, the mother's voice, as it slides up and down the Hmong language's 8 tones. So the first person we meet, besides the my of under my desk, is, well, the family, but the first person we meet is the mother. Across the world, maybe it doesn't matter the culture, whether they're patrilineal or matrilineal, there's no undervaluing the importance of a mother. So mother comes first. Without mother, there is no daughter having an epileptic seizure. So it's appropriate. It's contextual. And none of the adjectives she's using are thrown in there as an afterthought. They're very deliberate, right? She doesn't put nasal first. She puts breathy first. Nasal, gargly, or hum-like. So nasal is a characteristic perhaps that some would associate with a bit, some maybe negative or pejorative. No one in let's say American culture, we don't like a nasal sound. But if it's from another culture, what to do? It's fine. That's appropriate to the way they express their tones, appropriate to their language. So she doesn't put nasal first. She sandwiches it in between, breathy and hum-like. So breathy, nasal, gargly, or hum-like, as it slides up and down the Hmong language's 8 tones. When you say slides up and down, we can almost hear the glissandi of the language. We have a sense that the language has a tone to it, that it has a tone and a rhythm, and there's something. When you slide up and down the tones, it sounds musical, doesn't it? All right. Semicolon, not period. The father's voice, comma, louder and slower and more vehement. So there's a gendered quality to this. Vehement means a kind of what? What does vehement mean? Check it out on Google. Louder, slower, more vehement. More vehement than the mother. So the mother has a vehement tone, but more vehement. Semicolon, and my interpreter's voice. She doesn't say translator, okay? She could say translator. She said transcribe. But she says interpreter's voice. Now, I don't know how many of you have studied interpretation and have worked with interpreters and translators in hospital and healthcare settings, but interpreter is very important because what we need actually in a medical setting is an interpreter, somebody who can properly give us the gist, even if they don't have if they're missing a word. Maybe they're not a perfect translator, but they could be very, very good at conveying an interpretation of what is meant. Or they could mess it up. So interpreter gives us a sense of what the role of this person is who is involved in this scene. My interpreter's voice, mediating in Hmong and English, low and deferential in each language. So the father's voice is louder and slower, more vehement, but the interpreter, translator, is low and deferential. Now, when you're low and deferential, it means also low in status. It's a great word to use, low and deferential. So if you're deferential, you're not imposing your own views. It means that the interpreter was appropriate. Her interpreter, Anne Fadiman's interpreter, was acting appropriately, not getting in the way, hanging back a bit, low and deferential to the family, to Fadiman, as meanings were being conveyed. And she writes beautifully the verb mediating in Hmong and English. So an interpreter is not just telling the words, but she's mediating the conversation, meaning she's getting in the way of misconstrued meanings, okay? and she's trying to convey the essence of meaning, so mediating, trying to stay out of the way, but also not miss any beats. Okay? So far, so good. So the next sentence, the hubbub summons a whoosh of sense memories. The hubbub, all of this, hubbub means all of this, you don't want to say noise, all of these sounds is a kind of hubbub together, okay? H-U-B-B-U-B. A hubbub summons, S-U-M-M-O-N-S, summons, if you have to appear in court, you get a summons, yes. But there's also a kind of slightly different meaning, which is to call forth. A summons is to bring forth, right? The hubbub summons for her as she's listening to the cassettes, as Anne Fadiman is listening to the cassette and hearing the other half of the cassettes filled with the lees, right? More than half. She's telling us that hubbub, all of these sounds, babies crying, children playing, doors slamming, all of this hubbub, the mother's voice, right? Gargly, nasal, breathy, right? The father's voice, slower, more vehement, right? Louder. The deferential, mediating voice of the interpreter, yes? The hubbub of all of this summons, brings forth for Anne Fadiman a whoosh. It's one of these great automatopoeia words. It's perfectly placed. A whoosh of sense memories. The hubbub is also a kind of automatopoeic word. The hubbub, all this noise, summons a whoosh of sense memories. Memories based on the senses. So here she goes. She's going to expand a little bit beyond the aural palette. Okay? Beyond what we hear. Beyond what she hears. And here we go. Colon. She gives a colon. Beyond a whoosh, the hubbub summons a whoosh of sense memories. Colon. We're going to have a shopping list of the whoosh. The coolness of the red metal folding chair, reserved for guests, that was always set up as soon as I arrived in the apartment. Semicolon. The shadows cast by the amulet that hung from the ceiling and swung in the breeze on the length of its grocer's twine. Grocer's twine, yeah. The tastes of Hmong food, from the best, kwavnitsuas, which is a sweet stock similar to sugar cane, she writes in parentheses, to the worst, nitsav kyaj, congealed raw pig's blood. So that's the second paragraph. Let's look at this second sentence, this last sentence, rather, of the second paragraph. The hubbub summons a whoosh of sense memories, the coolness of the red metal folding chair reserved for guests that was always set up as soon as I arrived in the apartment. She's signaled a lot here, and it goes by very quickly. Let's pay attention. What is she signaling here? The red, 4 words, red metal folding chair. Red metal folding chair. Can you ever get that out of your mind? We all know what a folding chair is. You can pick it up at Walmart. Folding chair is not an expensive chair. It's metal. Maybe not the most comfortable. Maybe they put some padding on it so Anne would be comfortable. So she, maybe, obviously folded, yeah, folding chair. Red metal. We can picture it. It was reserved for guests. And it was always set up as soon as I arrived in the apartment. So what does this tell us about the space of the apartment? That it would be set up as soon as she arrived. Does it tell us that it's a huge palatial apartment, and in the Hmong culture, only red chairs should be reserved for guests? We don't know that, right? We don't know. We don't know the significance of red. All we know is that as soon as she arrives, a guest, in a Hmong family's home, in this case an apartment, the chair is set up for her. What does it tell us? Well, how big is this apartment? Is it big or is it small? If it was big enough, wouldn't the chair be set up all the time? Maybe not. But she describes, you can imagine where the chair is kept. The chair is kept carefully in somewhere nearby, which can quickly be set up. But there's not much room. There's a lot of kids and children playing, babies, and the chair is not out and about. The chair is going to be set up as soon as she arrives. All right. We learn about the socioeconomic status of the people. They live in a small place that can't accommodate a special room for guests. All that they can afford is a chair. Do you see now? SES, socioeconomic status. It signals that this family of Hmong refugees is 10 years later. This is written in the 1990s. They came in the 1980s. It tells us that they're getting along, they have an apartment, but they're not well-to-do. They're not rolling in it, as it were, big enough to have a guest room. Is their apartment? No. All right, let's go on. The shadows cast by the amulet that hung from the ceiling and swung in the breeze on the length of grocer's twine. Let's just start at the end. Grocer's twine. Grocer's twine is what? What is twine? Twine is that it's a kind of fabric-like rope from the grocers. It's a very natural fabric. So an amulet, something that is protecting the family, something probably brought from Laos, from home, from the hills, right? From home. Something brought from home probably shouldn't be held by a metal wire. It needs to move in the breeze. That's probably what's most comfortable for them. It's probably needs to move about in the breeze. There's something about it, it's moving maybe. The shadows cast by the amulet that hung from the ceiling and swung in the breeze on the length of its grocer's twine. There's a lot of information there. Are the shadows healing in some way if it catches you? Stay tuned. The third sense memory, part of the whoosh of sense memories, is the tastes. The tastes of Hmong food, from the best to the worst. Now, it's very American of her to tell us, she doesn't say the one I was most comfortable with to the one I was afraid of. She probably wrote that at some point, we can imagine, and then just decided to think, what is the reader thinking when they're going to see that the best is a sweet stalk similar to sugarcane? Well, that sounds great. We all love sweet things. And to the worst, congealed raw pig's blood. Most people in mainstream American society probably haven't had congealed raw pig's blood. So she's bringing us along as far as she can bring us. She's being nice to the reader by saying, for you, this would be the best. And for me too. And for me, this was the worst, and probably for you too. Those of you who aren't familiar with Hmong culture, who wouldn't be necessarily going to the store tomorrow to pick up raw congealed pig's blood. Do you see? And then she comes back to it in the next paragraph. I sat on the Lee's red folding chair for the first time on May 19th, 1988. May 19th, this is exactly how many years ago today, right? Earlier that spring, I had come to Merced, California, Merced spelled Merced, California, where they lived, because I had heard that there were some strange misunderstandings going on at the county hospital between its Hmong patients and its medical staff. One doctor called them collisions. She uses quotes, comma, which made it sound as if two different kinds of people had rammed into each other head on to the accompaniment of squealing brakes and breaking glass. So she uses the word break in two different ways. Screaming brakes, like a car brakes, and breaking glass. Very compelling. And of course, brake, B-R-A-K-E, and break, B-R-E-A-K. Different spellings, but homonyms, yes? As it turned out, the encounters were messy, but rarely frontal. Frontal meaning, if two cars hit each other like this, one front, another front coming like this, that's frontal. But usually, many accidents are like T-bone, like this, right? So she says, as it turned out, the encounters were messy, but rarely frontal. Both sides, this side and this side, were wounded, but neither side seemed to know what had hit it or how to avoid another crash. That sets up perfectly her next part, which is when you're not reaching something head on, you're kind of hitting it at an angle. And then Anne says, bringing us to this notion of angles, of a crash, of things hitting each other, of vantage points, she moves to this part. I'll read it. I have always felt that the action most worth watching is not at the center of things, but where edges meet. I like shorelines, weather fronts, international borders. There are interesting frictions and incongruities in these places, and often, if you stand at the point of tangency, you can see both sides better than if you were in the middle of either one. This is especially true, she says. This is especially true, I think, when the apposition is cultural. When the apposition is cultural. So at two cultures, at where cultures meet, the tangent. She doesn't want to be in the middle of a culture, right? She doesn't want to be in the middle where she can't see the other culture. She wants to be on the tangent of two different cultures. So if there's two different cultures, she would like to be here, right? At the tangent where the cultures meet, so that she can have a vantage point. As a writer, she takes up this position. She's more comfortable there, she says. Like international borders, weather fronts, and shorelines, where these kind of worlds or ecosystems almost meet, right? Air and cloud, space and cloud and so forth. And then she writes, when I first came to Merced, I hoped that the culture of American medicine, about which I knew little, when she then goes on to write, when I first came to Merced, I hoped that the culture of American medicine, about which I knew a little, and the culture of the Hmong, about which I knew nothing, would in some way illuminate each other if I could position myself between the two and manage not to get caught in the crossfire. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like me to do more of this, please stay tuned.